Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muchaneta to Napel, and today I have the pleasure of having Miss Lisa Lang here on stage with me. And for those who don't know who she is, I'm going to let her introduce herself, or shall I say reintroduce herself.
Thank you so much, my darling, to have me finally here. I've heard so much about this event, and finally, and especially very interesting in the year of 2023, to be on stage. And I will try to explain as quickly and as uncomplicated as possible, because I'm in policy. I'm based in Brussels. I'm the Director of EU Policy Affairs at EIT Climate KIC. EIT is the European Institute of Technology, and Climate KIC is the Knowledge Innovation Community. Translated, that is that we're simply the biggest innovation agency for climate change on European level. We have a direct mandate from the European Commission. We're basically here to save the world. And my job is to do it with policy. That's my toolkit.
I am actually looking forward to making policy sexy again, because I know a lot of people, when you think about legislation, policy, lawmakers, it's very scary. It's very much like, why do I need to know about this? So we're going to touch on that today, but let's first start talking about the fashion and textile industry. They've recently gotten a bit of a taste of all the regulations that are going to be coming into play. And I feel like a lot of brands have been running around like headless chickens. So, what should they be looking forward to or not looking forward to in 2023?
So basically, this is just a beginning, and there will be more, especially pressure legislation, directives, and responsibilities. So all of that actually started way, way, way back, several years ago. So basically what the European government, that's the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, they committed to something called the Green Deal. That means by 2050, Europe going carbon neutral entirely. That's the attempt. In this context, the European government just looked at the top 5 polluting industries, and one of them, surprisingly for the EU government, is the textile, especially the fast fashion industry. So this is a purely numbers game. So they just look, okay, we have building industry, construction industry, we have mobility, logistics, cars, and then we have fast fashion. So everything from the Brussels perspective is looked on carbon footprint. And in the textile industry, especially in fashion, is especially the fashion industry. So a lot of research has been done in the last years, and now they're simply looking at the data, because the dirty secret, literally the dirty secret, is in all of those sustainability, save the world, climate change programs, doesn't matter if you look in the US, in the United Nations with COP, or on European level, all of those programs have one thing in common: we won't be fast enough. And because of that, we, the policymakers, just like simply looking at the highest polluters where we can have the biggest impact as quickly as possible. And the fast fashion industry hasn't been regulated, hasn't been looked at for a very long time, and that simply just means there is an opportunity to make a change very quickly. We are talking about an industry which has 30 to 40% overproduction by default. In comparison, in the consumer electronics industry, overproduction is defined by 1%. So of course, the policymakers looking at it and it's like, so they haven't done their homework. We haven't looked into this. Oh, okay, how about we gonna put some pressure on this, because it has to happen fast. And that is 2023 for you. Everything what you've seen so far with like the EU textile strategy, for instance, this is just a beginning. The amount of legislations, directive, and reporting duties to the textile and fashion industry will be absolutely immense in the next years.
I feel a bit like the industry's been a bit like Lord of the Flies. You've seen that movie where they are doing what they want. There's no rules, there's no nothing. And then suddenly, wham, bam, this is what you guys need to do. And it's pretty scary. And I know that you were at COP27, you just mentioned it just now, working in partnership with the UN and bringing fashion to the conversation of climate change. What would you say was the outcome of fashion's first appearance on stage at COP27?
So in order to explain why all of the sudden fashion for the first time is on stage with United Nations, like why not before? I mean, like fashion is like kind of like a topic which literally touches all of us. So mechanical boring policy explanation incoming. The European government is defining itself in ecosystem industries. There were 13 of them, so it's like mobility, energy, textiles, tourism, aerospace and defense and stuff like that. Since 2019, for the very first time ever in the history of the European Union, culture and creative industries is now an acknowledged and established ecosystem. So, and it feels odd because it is. It's like, okay, I mean, like we're in Europe, like culture, heritage, art, we always had that. But on the EU government, you see that also with EIT, it was always very research, innovation, tech-driven. So, and as we know, design and creativity is very difficult to put into bottles, especially in spreadsheets, and especially the effect on it. But finally, and it took 15 years, by the way, the entire process, now we have this, it's like, so the most important thing is that culture creative industry is now an established ecosystem. That means it has to be considered in all of the European programs and activities. Culture creative industries is defined in 11 categories. Yes, we like labels and silos. So it's architecture, interior design, music, movies, typography, advertisement, and fashion. So that was mechanically really important because now, you know, they're visible. All of a sudden, they're visible. And then that was the first step. And then, because of the pressure of the Green Deal, we looked at that new EU industry and said, like, well, from a sustainability footprint perspective, all of those communities within that culture creative industry, the highest polluting industry is fast fashion. So we just simply go through the numbers and say like, okay, who is the highest polluter? Where can we make a change? And that also explains why the fashion industry and also all other culture creative industries kind of like have been left alone for the last decades. I mean, like go into every design university, art university, and you always will find a grumpy design researcher who says like, design is everything, it has the highest impact. Why is it not considered as a part of legislation in political movement and in political thinking and decision making? It's simply because the mechanics wasn't there. And now it is. And that was timing-wise, it was actually possible that we were able to put that topic on international level with the United Nations, because we Climate KIC, we were able to say, it's now acknowledged in the European Union, now we have to bring it in on international level. And that's for the first time we had fashion, gaming, digital arts, architecture as a main topic in the innovation pavilion at COP.
I'm kind of curious because I know we've had conversations off camera and off stage about how we can bring the textiles industry and the fashion industry to the table. Because a lot of decisions are being made and I feel like we need the voices of the industry at the decision-making part of it. Would you say this should be the case? And how can we get them interested? Because most people find policy to be, dare I say it, boring.
And I totally understand it, because today business of policy is kind of boring, because you basically, in German you say you need to have Sitzfleisch. So, you know, you just sit there in lots of meetings and you have to listen and talk because it's very mechanical, it's paperwork. But, you know, like, especially on EU level, when you have like 27 different partners. We used to have 28. With different cultures, with different systems. And there is something called democracy. So it just takes a while to bring people together to agree on certain things, especially on topics they haven't talked about, they haven't heard about. So the best way how textile and the fashion industry can adopt is simply learning from other industries who have a lot of experience in that, how they've been doing it in the last 30 years. So if you look into the chemical industry, automotive, steel, like, the established industries, there is, we call it lobby, you can call it lobbyism. I think like compliance is like a little bit more softer world, the result counts. But in the end of the day, yes, you, culture, creative industries, fashion, textiles, just have been thrown into a system which has been built without taking you in consideration. That's the situation. Of course, as a first reaction is like, the system is fucked, we need to change it. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the time. So we simply can just learn how the system works, learn how other people or institutions work with those industries, and just simply hit the ground running. And that means with consolidation, collaborations, working together. Wait, that is difficult in fashion, right? Like this whole collaborations, working together, sharing knowledge.
We're competitive. We're very competitive. We don't share information.
So we're talking about culture. But that is basically because I know I got invited here to scare the pants out of you, or the skirts. But this is just reality. Don't shoot the messenger. Is that the amount of legislations which will come for an industry who is not trained and skilled in interacting with policymakers will be very, very difficult. If you look into the steel industry and the automotive industry, they will find loopholes. They will do the dance around because they have European associations who've, in Brussels, we have on record 30,000 lobbyists officially registered. And Brussels is small. And it's the pharma industry, it's again steel, automotive, it's actually also digital industries. There's something called the Digital Privacy Pact, just by the way. So all of the big digital companies, they have their own associations. So that will be very difficult. The only way how to survive is you have to work together. The alternative is you will die. Because you will die because you can't comply to all of the reporting, to all of the legislations. And on EU level, simply they don't care. They have to fulfill the KPIs, the key performance indicators. We have to go net zero by 2050, and that is also already late because zero is not good enough. We actually have to go minus, just in case if you don't want to sleep tonight, but that is the reality. So it's going to be absolutely, utterly ruthless, and it will happen in the next 4 years. Because by 2026, the carbon border taxes and the Corporate Sustainable Responsibility Directive, which is a non-financial reporting, which says you have to show us, you, industry, to the government, you have to show us that all of your products comply to sustainability standards, and if you can't, you won't be allowed to trade in the EU anymore. And it will start next year with the top 50,000 companies in the EU, and it will go to SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, by 2026. If you can't comply, you won't be allowed to trade. If you don't believe me, I have historical evidence. Do you remember GDPR? That cookie thingy? Oh, that was painful, right? Nobody cared. You had to do that anyway. Another example, 2014. That was back in the day where when you travel across Europe, there was no consolidated roaming. like the telcos, so like, why should we change? Why should we, work together? We're making a shit ton of money for everyone traveling from one European country to the next one. But of course, we are in the EU, so the EU went top down. There was the wonderful Commissioner Nelly Cruz, very fashionable woman, and she opened a press conference in 2014 after having tried to consolidate the telecommunications companies. And she said, comply or die. That's the EU for you. And that was before the Green Deal. That was before sustainability. So like, what do you think is going to happen?
I think you just achieved your goal. You've scared them.
Did I like some mic drop? Are you still awake? Sorry, that was scared.
Okay. Stop scaring my audience. Let's move on. You recently were quoted in Vogue Business saying, only with pressure and disaster do people change. So it unfortunately has to get worse before it gets better. So what should we expect then? Are we still going to be going through the worst stage for a couple of years before it starts to get better?
Yes. Well, it's just this human behavior. I mean, like, look at, climate change and everything is like, I mean, it's not like that we knew about it since yesterday. We've known that for decades. So, and now at the moment where it touches us, like literally, so here's the future for you. It's like climate refugees. So like people who have to leave because they can't survive, like literally survive in the place where they live. That will be a one great movement. Food and energy security. We don't have that. So we will now go on a point that we are scared for our survival to the point that we are now finally changing. And we could have started that 50 years ago, 30 years ago latest. So of course it's like it's always, it's in the human system, companies, you only change if you really, really have to, unfortunately. So of course we have to put pressure on. And then the evidence is there, and now we can also really feel it, because of course we would like to ignore it.
See, I kind of agree that in the fact that change only comes about when it becomes desperate. So, but one thing that has been happening is greenwashing, which people perceive to be change, but not really change. So greenwashing has been accused of taking away the industry's potential to make real impact. How can we rectify that? Because I must admit, I think some brands do it very innocently. And then you got the ones that have got the big marketing and PR machine, and they're just doing it in order to gain more customers. But how can we make sure that brands avoid greenwashing?
I totally agree, and this is not only about system bashing. It's because we are working in a capitalism system which wasn't built on consideration of sustainability. So again, it's even if you like to be sustainable, also what is the definition of sustainability?
I've got my version. Place? Yeah.
So we have a systemic issue. And I think it's the first thing what we can do is transparency. It's and that is, of course, am I not tapping into one of the systemic issues, especially in the fast fashion industry, is that transparency and trackability in supply chains. Yes. So I think it's the authenticity and so this whole authenticity thing is will be replaced by transparency. Is the marketing or the narrative from now onwards. And that also means, of course, it's as much as genuinely brands, companies want to go totally sustainable, it's also it is nearly impossible. And it took us a while to get into this non-sustainable world. So of course it will take us a while to get into a sustainable world. The problem is we just simply don't have the time. So we have to make shortcuts, and that means sometimes certain kind of systems who can't change fast enough. Sorry to say, not sorry to say, because it's just a fact. Fast fashion industry they won't be able to change fast enough, so they just will have to disappear.
You see fast fashion disappearing?
Out of necessity, because they will be unable to trade and do business.
Or because of the legislation?
Because they can't comply. They can't comply. So, which actually should, for innovators, for real designers, for real change makers, that should actually be a business opportunity. Like starting something new from sustainability from the get-go. Because like what we are trying to do is like we're trying to retrofit industries to put some green lipstick on it. And as much as sometimes we try, it's sometimes mechanically, time-wise, engineering-wise, it's simply not possible. And that's simply not possible, just has to go. And, you know, again, it's like, and legislations will do that. And again, for an industry who has an established lobbyist and compliance training, it will be very difficult for them to find loopholes. Because there are loopholes. Because loopholes are there when policies are made very, very quickly. So it's very difficult to develop legislations without loopholes under the pressure of time.
See, I see the industry, like how they have a sustainability kind of like manager. They're going to have a policy advisor. I can kind of see the fashion industry looking to get policy people on board in order to kind of keep them compliant with the legislations coming out.
Yeah, so that's the thing. So like all of those, established industries like the EU ecosystem industries who've been there for a very long time, they all have their policy departments. As a standard, they all have an office in Brussels. They either call them compliance or like legal affairs or EU affairs or like policy managers, different words whatsoever. But they just knew it's like that engaging with policy makers and with politicians is a part of the business. Because here's the thing, is like, so all of policymakers and politicians, they're not out there to destroy your industry. It's actually on the contrary. It's like they are there to be supportive and helpful, but they can only do that if you're engaging with them. So, because like with that article from Vogue Business you were referring to, like, let's be like very clear here. We have to make a distinction between fashion and fashion industry. Fashion will prevail. Fashion, especially on European level, it's about heritage, it's about craft, it's about identity, it's about innovation, design, the excitement of bringing people together, telling a story. That is, something like more truly European is like our story of fashion, and that's emotion. But what the current fashion industry has made out of fashion, that has to go. So the legislations are directed on the fashion industries who haven't been regulated for a very long time, who are very polluting, and that has to change. At the same time, we have, on European level, it is our utmost interest to support and help fashion. But that is, it used to be together somehow, but like in the last 30 years especially, it went completely separate. So we will have to see, who will survive.
So you're basically saying fashion's going to be redefined. What we know fashion today will most likely not be the case in 2 to 3 years because it's being changed.
Yeah, and I want to see that that is a huge opportunity, because like within the fashion industry, it's like, it's like we are talking with brands, with employees of brands all the time, and like, it becomes more and more difficult to work for a brand, for a company who is so damaging and polluting to the environment. So, and also like across all of the industries, we see a movement of climate quitters. So where we have like, high-end engineers who used to work for big oil companies quitting their job and go, and joining Greenpeace or climate change associations. So there's a huge shift also within the people in the industries because they don't want to support the evil at the same time. So that makes me like really, really, really hopeful is that for people, designers, everyone involved in the process who truly love fashion, they are the ones who also can change the fashion industry, the fast fashion industry, by simply not complying and leaving and supporting other fashion brands who truly want to go sustainable.
So what should the textiles industry be aware of when it comes to legislations? What is coming for the textile industry?
So you tapped on a really good point because like from the European perspective is like technical textiles, fashion, fast fashion, protective gear, everything is together, it's called textiles. So that is the category, textiles. I would say like that, especially technical textiles, especially in Germany, because they have, with like fast fashion production has moved outside of Europe, but technical textiles, like high engineered textiles, that knowledge stayed in Europe. Germany is really strong in technical textiles production. And because of that, they had to learn to comply to a lot of like quality assurance and legislations. So this is like as close within your cluster textiles you can get is like to engage with the technical textiles industries because they have far more associations. They're really old style. We need like new, cool, hipper association people. But like that's the closest you can get. Within the fashion industry, the issue is like that, like for instance, we don't have a functional European Fashion Council. That's like one of those things like since decades. Like I'm very excited, I'm very, very hopeful. There is the European Fashion Alliance coming up. So they got started like last year, took years to get there. So I'm really hopeful. Elke, if you hear it, I'm with you. We need to bring everyone together. So that means, like imagine, you bring like the Louis Vuitton, the Chanel, the Kering, like all of the big fashion brands, they have to sit together on a table and agree on a digital trackability standard. Imagine. When I said that the first time, I think like 5 years ago, I got laughed out of the room. And yes, I know it's laughable. But I can tell you, this is like one of the only ways how to survive. And again, it happened in other industries. When Tesla came in the automotive industries, all of the European car manufacturers were like, oops, like this electric engineering thingy, we might have like kind of missed that because we were looking at our old industry. Now there is this new guy who has no idea about cars. What is he doing? All of a sudden he comes from there and he goes into our industry and wants to tell us what to do. Elon, Tesla. So do you know like what the European automotive companies did, the competitors? They sat down together, the competitors sat down together and agreed on a research program where they shared IP, intellectual property, and said like, we all have to put our resources together. We have to engage with the policymakers together so we all in Europe can move ahead. And then if you might have noticed, all of a sudden there was a jump with the car manufacturers and all of a sudden they had electric cars. The Porsche, the VW. That came out of because they consolidated. They had to. So we can learn again from history and from other industries. And yes, a part of survival is you have to work together.
See, that's my dream right there. Getting fashion working together. Because I think a lot of people are aware that with the industry, it's all about competitiveness rather than collaboration. Not being transparent, not being honest, not sharing information. So we need to kind of change the mentality a little bit for them to become more sharers. rather than, competitors?
You know, when I kind of like stumbled into the fashion industry, I felt like a little bit like an alien, because like in the innovation tech startup industry, it's like sharing is a part of the survival and the strategy. I mean, if you like think for a second, like how this whole digital innovation was able to happen so quickly, is because, so I'm a trained software engineer, sorry, I'm a nerd. So because we learned how to share code. So, the whole thing, we had GitHub, knowledge repository. So we learned how to code programs together. That is one of the part. It's like, if you look, all of your apps, it's basically a mashup of different codes from different people, and then you just throw it together. That's how you work very quickly. Did I mention that? Working together? And there's a training and a methodology to it. And this is what you learn in software engineering really, really quickly. You have like these hackathons and these like events, like the conferences where you have workshop. That's a part of the culture. And now we're looking into the fashion industry, which is the complete opposite. So it's like technology is a tool, yes, but like we have to go even far, like a few steps back, and like look into the way how fashion designers get taught in universities. Like, this is not about being the next Karl Lagerfeld. Karl Lagerfeld is dead, right? So this is not about being like this only one person. Also from a perspective of sustainability, is like, you can't do it on your own. Countries have to work together. Cities, regions, nationalities have to work together in order to, fight climate change. So this whole notions about like, okay, we're doing it on our way, it will just end up to utter failure.
Do you know what it is? They're so much focused on saving their company instead of saving the industry.
I mean, we saw that with COVID. It's like in a time of crisis, the first instinct that like, let's look after ourselves, like our families, our cities, our nations first. I mean, hashtag toilet paper. And, that was really funny. So like I was like living outside of Germany, and I had to explain why Germans hoarding toilet paper. And I was like, it's a part of the culture. But like, COVID like really also taught us what happens when you not work together and what happens when you work together. And it's the same also like with climate change. So like at COP26 2 years ago, Biden and Ursula von der Leyen, by the way, Ursula von der Leyen is our president, our European Commission president. So they met at COP26 in Glasgow, and they started the EU-US Trade and Technology Council. And that was a council where, by the way, every European citizen can participate in the working groups. If you just Google it, it's called futurium.eu. You, as a European taxpayer, you can participate in EU policy making all the time. You can go into working groups, you can become an expert reviewer, you can go into the transparency register. Everything is transparent. The UX of the European websites are might not so up to snuff, but hey, they write newsletters and they're on Twitter. Not that much on Instagram. Now what happened is like, so they officially say like EU, US has to work together. And what you've seen is now, especially in the last months, is that a lot of legislations which got released from European level, and then a few days later, the US followed suit. So as an example, so the Corporate Sustainability Responsibility Directive got released, what was it, like a couple of months ago? So it's this like non-financial reporting for all industries. 2 days later, the US Congress released something very similar, and like those two frameworks work together. And working in that council together really helped. Last week, the opposite happened. The US just dropped in an insane budget of $368 billion of a fund which is supposed to push the industries more into the green transition. It's insane.
That's a lot of money.
And now the EU has to follow suit. So Ursula was in Davos and said like, "Ui, I have to release something." And now we're looking into the EU Green Deal industrial plan, which has to find a lot of money to do exactly that, helping all of the companies, and yes, also the fashion industries, the textiles industries, all of the industries, to finance and support the green transition. Because now we're in a marathon. So it's always like, okay, one country starts, or one continent, or one government says like, we're doing this, and then the other government goes like, ooh, we have to do that. In order not to be blindsided, you establish councils and collaborations. So you talk before you go on stage. It works sometimes, not always.
I actually read that Green Deal. I'm really into reading those type of papers before bed these days. I'm really kind of wanted to know what's going on in this space. But talking about the Green Deal, I read that there is a plan in place to make Europe the home of clean tech and industrial innovation. What does the road to net zero look like at the moment?
Less carbon footprint. That's the first thing. So like that is the measurement. Again, we can talk about like if carbon footprint and going net zero is the right measurement. That's the only one, like not the only one, but like the established one to be have. Yes, I know. We can talk about it, but like, so this is the guidance. It's like, again, reduce our carbon footprint. And that again means there will be even more, so like my crystal ball just kind of says, it's like there will be a huge focus on the textile industry, because just look at the numbers. The amount of carbon footprint on EU level for the textile industry is insane. Of course, as insane as like in the rest of the world. But like Europe wants to champion clean tech because it wants to be competitive and it wants to stay relevant. You know, like a brand. It's like, so you want to be ahead. So of course you release a program, marketing campaign, where you say like, okay, we are going ahead. We are doing this cool thing. And in order to do this, you have to shed off some dead weight. And you have to be ruthless.
Talking about ruthlessness, let's talk about textile waste. I feel like this is a space that we need to be ruthless, sheriff-like behavior in order to get people into place. And it seems to be on the top of the agenda for lawmakers right now. So what can we expect in terms of dealing with our textile waste? What kind of laws need to be put in place?
Okay, taking the risk that I will never get invited here again, but let's talk about circular economy. 30 to 40% overproduction in an industry is freaking insane. It's unheard of. And you can't do that with secondhand and recycling and upcycling. That is lipstick. That is green lipstick. It's like, you know, the failure of circular economy is the need to recycle.
Really?
Yeah. Because if you have a true circular economy, you don't need to recycle. It's like everything gets, so it's a definition thing. It's because at the moment, what we are in the textile industry, we are overproducing so much, so we are just trying to recycle. Or we're trying to develop new textiles. All of that nice and fine, but the biggest problem is still that you overproduce. So how about we start with reducing the overproduction in the first place, because the amount of recycling and like waste management we have to do for overproduction, that energy, that money, that carbon footprint, that is also insane on top of it. So again, absolutely ruthless from the EU level is like to reduce carbon footprint means it's like we can't do touch-ups anymore. We have to look into really hardcore reducing overproduction for any cost. Recycling, then when we go on a normal industry standard of a couple of % overproduction, yes, then we can look into recycling. But like the biggest issue is like, and that is so scary, is because that is the absolute core systemic issue of the entire industry. Number two, the lack of transparency in supply chains, which also means the lack of digitalization as well. So they are the two things. So if you want to do a real impact, reduce overproduction, digitize the industry. And these are those two legislations which will force the industry. Like, that will come because, like, you know, on EU level, they're just, again, looking into the numbers and say, like, you have to digitize and show us digital product passport, in Germany Lieferkettengesetz. So that forces all of the industry to go digital. If you can't comply, you can't trade.
That is the problem right now. How am I going to show you my entire supply chain when I don't even know it myself?
Exactly. So, and that is, like, people, we are in 2023, and you can't tell me from where your suppliers come from. I mean...
Well, the good thing is the innovation is there. You can do it.
Yeah,
you just need to do it.
Yeah, so like it's not about like, because, you know, then like technology, like, you know, this is not an excuse. It's like they're like, just go into other industries. They've been doing that for a long time, but like it would require, like, for instance, but imagine what is like that you have big companies like, you know, H&M and Louis Vuitton to call the chemical or the electronic manufacturing industry and say, like, you know, you do this technology thing with trackability, traceability. Can we have something like this too? Because from a technology perspective, technology doesn't care if it tracks a shirt or a piece of electronics. That's the cool thing with algorithms. They don't care. So like, we don't have to also, again, like develop a new technology. If somebody comes like, we have to develop a whole new thing. No, it's everything is there. The issue is like how to implement it and have an industry standard. And it will be for the fashion industry has a choice. Either they consolidate and figure it out on their own in compliance with the new legislation, or they're trying to go as far as they did so far, and they will just like die because they won't go trade. And that also means for all of the non-European brands, there is a big polluting fast fashion brand starting with S from China. That is like one of the, if you read the legislation, is because they won't be able to comply those legislation. So that means they won't be able to trade in Europe. Of course, there will be loopholes, but like after a certain time, because you just track and trace the carbon footprint, and like if you can't make it transparent, you won't be allowed to trade in Europe.
So how long do people have in order to comply to this? Are they given 2 years in order to get things in order?
2026.
So 3 years.
So that corporate responsibility directive will get in power for the biggest companies in all industries by 2024. And it will go completely mandatory by 2026 because it simply has to. It has to.
See, you heard it here, 2026, guys. Just before we continue, I want to know if there's any questions at all from anyone with regards to what Lisa's referring to.
Everyone is frozen. That's the thing is like there's nothing, like the best way how to support, you know, fashion, I'm not saying fashion industry, fashion, is we have to be like ruthlessly, utterly, honestly, realistic what is going to happen. It's like, yeah, so just like one of the examples is like, so you might have seen that like in fashion shows, like the climate activists are now going into fashion shows. Because like those fashion shows, what we have now, they're just pretending everything is fine, but it's not. We have to wake up, and it comes with pain.
I think you're an alarm clock. I think you've woken them up. You have a question?
Sure. And we don't
Yes. Is it working? So how,
Can you hold your microphone?
yeah, so how the government or the part who will control this digital passport, how will that function from a perspective that the passport is the right one when they check it? Because I can see I'm sustainability innovation manager. I have the title. But I can see in certification and audits, there's now a lot of course, wrong certifications and TCs, which are not actually TCs. So you really have to be careful that they're giving you the right documentation. And I can imagine when that starts 2024 and 2026, is there enough power and transparency to follow that up, that what is given from the companies, that is really according to the standard, according to the law, and like, how do they gonna check it? I can't imagine when this suddenly comes at the same time, they don't have even all the people, power, everything in place.
Yeah. So the whole issue is like with the digital product passport is, for instance, like what is the definition of a product? For example, so like a jacket has by average 38 items, like the zipper, the buttons, the embellishment and stuff like that. So like the question is now is like, is the jacket itself one product and has one passport, or does it need a zipper? Like even the yarn you use for the seams, even the yarn itself needs to have its own digital product passport. So those decisions, those questions are now being decided.
Yeah, and then the question, is it exactly to that? Is it then the brand, or is it then the factory itself? Is it like, for example, in GRS or GOTS, where you pass over the TC, is it then the same for the digital passport? Because when you produce fabric or yarn or buttons, you're not directly connected to the product because you don't know what your brand makes out of it.
Yeah, so two answers to that. So like one is like that, of course, the entire pressure will be moved to the manufacturers.
Of course.
So like this whole management thing it's totally insane. Also the issue is like that usually the manufacturers are not in Europe, especially for fast fashion. So here's the thing is like, that is actually the brilliance of like the non-financial reporting is like that. With the European brand, it's their responsibility to work with a factory who can comply those certifications, even though they're outside of Europe. Because they can't say like, oh, we are not producing in Europe, so we don't have to comply. It's like, no. But if you want to trade those products in Europe, so that is like one loophole missed. But of course and we have that always, is like that the certifications, we had that with the masks during COVID, CE certification is like that, who is testing the tester, who is certifying the certifier. So frankly, that is a part of the issue. The only thing what helps you is like, and that is for industry, is again,
call me.
It's compliance officers and compliance associations. I'm trying to avoid the word lobbyists here. But this is like how automotive, like how do you think the aviation industry got bailed out during COVID? There was like people talk to each other. That's the thing is also like with, culture creative industries in COVID. It's like, why didn't get musicians, artists get, as much support as the aviation industry? Policy engagement. So yes, there will be a whole chaos of like, which product, what certification, then also what kind of information is there, coding, decoding, compliance, stuff like that. Yes, absolutely. For the industries who are used with processes like this and who can engage and have relationships with politicians where they can just say like, because also again, policymakers and politicians, they're not doing it to like, upset you. They're simply trying to do their job, but they can't be anywhere. So like they can't be everywhere and they don't know all of the industries. So they are actually very open and welcoming. They are actually Also, like we've seen that with Climate KIC all the time when they like call us, okay, like, you know, food security is really important. So we are very active in food and agriculture. So they're calling us and say like, okay, how can we do like real green farming? So we are being the bridge between the industry and the governance. Again, we have to work together. But it works because like one of the oldest and most influential lobbyist association is actually the European farming industries. I think they have 115 people in the Brussels office. So, and again, where's the fashion industry? Where's the creative industry? On the one side, because they haven't been acknowledged, but this is now, we're in an utterly wild west.
Yeah, because then do you have audits, like when you have a certification, right? They come into the company, they check where do you put the, for example, GAS or GOTS, it doesn't matter, but they check all your products, your social, like they check everything. So will it be like similar?
Yes. So you will go because it's a non-financial compliance directive. So like, yes, there will be audits. So just imagine the first audit, it will be a bloodbath. And the question is not what, is not if, it's just like how and when and how much blood will be on the floor.
And I mean, who in the end is gonna make the judgment? Your factory is not allowed to export anything or deliver anything.
So the thing is like, it depends like where the factory is at. So it like goes on the national level and the national level in compliance with EU level.
And then with the brands in Norway, Switzerland, I mean, they all do in the EU.
I mean, Switzerland is a bit different because Switzerland is not in the EU.
Yeah, but they produce and they also have the main customers in the EU.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the same for them as well.
Yeah, it's the same like Canada, US, Mexico, China. It's like, because the thing is that even though you're not manufacture or produce in Europe, but if you want to sell to Europe, you still have to comply. It will be softer than like when you're actually really in Europe. But like the issue is like, in order for us to become the worldwide, Europe, the clean tech champions of the world, we have to start at our doorsteps. But that also means it's like, hey, for all of the factories, the industries, to their government, it's like, hey, we would really like to be sustainable, but we need support. We need support through knowledge. We need support through, financial aid and digitalization. In order to do that, you need to engage with your government. Yeah. And a lot of the other industries doing that already. There's another question.
I was watching.
I just would like to add that it's a market surveillance, and that's who's controlling already. So it's nothing not existing all over Europe. You have market surveillance, Marktüberwachung, and as for the due diligence act, Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, it will be the so-called BAFA. It's an agency as well. So you do have to control it. Otherwise, it's, as you said, it's useless. But yeah, I suppose this is simply the missing link you were talking about. That's why I'm saying it. And don't underestimate the market surveillance. It's not only in Germany. If you distribute all around Europe, you have Italy, France, Spain, so on and so forth. And you don't want to get into their hands. and that's why. And that's a trigger. From my point of view, it's all about legislation. You just have to look at about REACH, for instance, chemical legislation.
Yeah,
it's working.
Mercosur, like all of like chemical industries. So that's the
it's
thing.
Working.
So yeah, and it's working. I mean, like depends who you ask, because everybody is complaining. But like, see, the thing is, again, it's like this. What even feels like a surprise and super scary. This has been a long time coming. A lot of the old established industries, they are prepared for it. Yes, there are loopholes. Yes, there are audits. There are a solution for it. You just need to know. It will be very difficult, but also it is utterly, totally necessary for Europe to do so. There is no way around. And the only way to survival is learn from the other industries, team up with European associations. We have we have wonderful institutions like the European standardization bodies, CEN. This is fantastic. They are awesome. They have a startup program. They're working with kids. They are there to like standardize and support us. It's like you have so many associations who are there to help us. The European Intellectual Property, body, they are there to help us. All of that is already there. Now because the fashion industry hasn't done its homework for such a long time, they have to get up and running, get a lot of pressure. If you don't work together, it doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how much of your own systems you have. And yes, those brands know exactly who I mean. It's like, if you don't participate in a consolidated European standard and comply to European policy, it won't matter. You might get away with it for a very long time, but do you? Because that's the story. It's like, if do you want to be one of those brands? It's like, we tried to ditch it for like 10 years. Then also it's like, do your kids want to work there? Do your grandchildren? It's like, you worked in these industries who've tried to ditch it for such a long time. Because that's also like one of the narratives for like climate change is like that we will see the companies who are not submitting, who are trying to run away, and then you just release that list. And that's a marketing ploy, because also those brands, they will need customers and they will need employees. And people start to refuse to buy and to work for highly polluting companies.
My mic's gone off. Your lesson here is no shortcut. Cut. I don't know. Our mic keeps going off. Yeah, so no. Any other questions before we?
I will be hiding in a corner somewhere.
Any other questions? I've no. I think so. Our mics get switched off and they tell us to leave. Any other questions at all? Anybody?
Can I say like one last thing is like events like this. Can I get one more? Oh, yeah, no, good. See, technology is not going to stop us talking about technology. So one of those things is like events like this, also like fashion shows, for instance, now have to be the place where you meet to collaborate. In other industries, like again in innovation tech startups, they're using all of these, look at the Web Summit in Lisbon. It's an entire networking event for like, not only show off your products, but it's also there where you sit down and talk and make deals and work together. So the time is over that you just have a trade show and you just listen to people. What we now need are workshops, collaborative roundtables, and to sign and file agreements how to move forward. And that's, again, this is how other industries do that. So you have a fantastic event here. It's like, go and build bridges with other events within the industry and start working together, because that's your only chance for survival.
And with that, we bring it to the end. If anybody wants to speak to Lisa on a one-on-one, we are in the back over there at the Shape Innovate booth. I think it's number 4. So she'd be more than happy to answer any questions or to continue the conversation. Otherwise, Lisa, thank you so much. And I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you.